Remove her from the stage. She's using a wheelchair. This venue is for concerts, not some sideshow performance." The Greenwood Center for the Arts went dead silent, as if someone had muted the entire world. Every person held their breath, all eyes focused on one spot. There sat Samantha Linwood, just 17 years old, positioned at the magnificent Steinway grand piano, her hands poised gracefully above the ivory keys. Her wheelchair barely caught the gentle stage lighting, yet Lucian Drexler had managed to make it the center of attention with his cruel words. Lucian moved closer, his piercing gaze sharp behind those signature gold-framed glasses, the same ones featured on Classical Insight magazine's cover the previous winter. "This venue exists for musical artistry, not for publicity stunts disguised as charity," he continued, his voice carrying across the auditorium with the calculated coldness of someone accustomed to absolute authority. An assistant started moving toward the piano bench. Lucian gestured for him to halt. He wasn't finished yet. "Do you realize the value of that instrument?" he said, nodding toward the Steinway. "It's not some plaything for individuals with physical limitations and zero professional prospects. What exactly are we accomplishing here? Moving the crowd to emotional tears?" His voice dripped with mockery. "Wonderful. Perhaps next time we'll have a street performer lead the symphony orchestra." Scattered uncomfortable chuckles rippled through some audience members, but nobody intervened. Samantha remained silent, her fingers slowly curled away from the keyboard's edge. She refused to look up, unwilling to let him witness any tears that might form. Lucian continued his verbal assault. He paced deliberately in front of the stage, like an instructor berating a student who had overstepped her boundaries. "Allow me to speculate. You've picked up several measures of Clair de Lune by listening, and now believe you can share the spotlight with legitimate musicians. Your personal journey might tug at heartstrings, young lady, but this platform is reserved for performances that take breath away, not merely inspire sympathy." A stagehand approached Samantha with gentle concern, leaning toward her. "I'm terribly sorry, miss. I was instructed to—" "It's fine," she cut him off quietly, maintaining her composure. "I'll go." She rolled herself backward, turning away from the piano without a second glance. The sound of her wheels against the hollow stage floor echoed like a drumbeat of humiliation. "I can't help but think, if I had witnessed that moment firsthand, I would have given that man a piece of my mind he'd never forget. Do you feel the same way? If so, smash that like button and share your thoughts in the comments section." In the third row sat Ariel Monroe, completely motionless. She wasn't simply observing, she was absorbing, not through a phone camera, but with her memory. She remained statue-still in her hooded sweatshirt, lips pressed tight, pulse racing. She recognized Lucian's particular brand of cruelty all too well. He had once told her that her piano performance resembled a protest march set to music in B minor. She hadn't set foot on a conservatory stage since that day, until tonight. Now he had struck again. The 35-second video clip hit social platforms by midnight. A backstage worker had captured the entire exchange, including Lucian's street performer comment and his parting shot. "She doesn't require a piano. She needs validation from a counselor." The post exploded across the internet in less than 6 hours. The caption read, "He dismissed her as charity. All she wanted was to perform." Samantha skipped school the following day. She couldn't eat breakfast either. Instead, she positioned herself in the backyard beneath the oak tree her father had planted before his first military deployment. A weathered folding table supported her old Yamaha keyboard. She stared at it without touching a single key. Her mother, a former nurse, emerged with hot tea and a vintage quilt. "He's a bitter individual," her mother said gently. "People like him confuse meanness with brilliance." "I'm not upset," Samantha whispered. Her mom set down the tea carefully. "That's because you're still processing the hurt. The anger will surface." That evening, the doorbell chimed. Samantha's father, a retired Army sergeant walking with a cane, his weathered eyes behind reading glasses, answered the door. "A good evening," said the visitor. "I'm Ariel Monroe. I need to speak with your daughter." 10 minutes later, Samantha and Ariel faced each other across the kitchen table in complete silence. No formal introductions were necessary. They understood each other immediately. "I witnessed what happened," Ariel began. "You handled that situation with more grace than most grown-ups would have shown." "I didn't do anything," Samantha replied. "You didn't break down. That matters." "I don't want to discuss it." "Then let me ask something different," Ariel said, retrieving a folder from her bag. "Do you still have the desire to play?" Samantha offered no response. Ariel placed a piece of paper on the table. No musical notation was visible, only time signatures, unusual symbols, and a title that read, "Unspoken." "You composed this?" Ariel shook her head. "I experienced it, every single emotion. That man and his words. I've heard similar venom before, different phrasing, different venues, but identical poison." Samantha stared downward. "I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone." "You're not here to prove yourself," Ariel said. "You're here to remember what originally drew you to music." Samantha studied the sheet music, then gazed through the window where the porch light flickered in the breeze. Somewhere beyond that dancing light, a small flame was rekindling within her. With a single breath, she reached toward the keyboard beside her chair. One key, one note. Not for revenge, not for others, but purely for herself. The church basement in South Hartford carried the faint scent of floor wax and aged hymnals. Metal folding chairs lined the walls, while a battered upright piano occupied the corner, its keys yellowed by decades of use. Yet in that space, caught between the echoes of Tuesday night's thunderstorm and the gentle buzz of fluorescent lighting, above, Samantha Linwood was rediscovering something she thought she'd lost forever, her authentic voice. Ariel Munro stood behind her with crossed arms, her expression unreadable. "Stop overthinking and just breathe," she instructed. "You possess the spark. You simply don't trust yourself to ignite it yet." Samantha's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her wheelchair creaked softly as she shifted her position. The first note she struck was hesitant, like someone gently tapping on a locked door. The second carried more confidence. By the third note, the entire atmosphere had transformed. Ariel's eyebrows lifted slightly. This girl had genuine talent. They returned each evening for an entire week. No recording devices, no written music, just Sam, the piano, and a woman who had once retreated from the very same battle Sam now faced. With each session, Ariel pushed her further. "Stop holding back. Play like you have something urgent to communicate that nobody else will say." "But I don't feel angry like you do," Sam protested once. "You should be," Ariel responded. "He humiliated you in front of a room full of cowards and called it artistic criticism." By Friday, Samantha's musical voice had evolved completely. It wasn't traditional classical music. It wasn't even polished, but it was authentic and powerful. A language born from wounded dignity. Ariel pulled a flyer from her jacket pocket. "Next Saturday, community showcase at the local stage. You're performing." Samantha's eyes widened. "Absolutely not. I'm nowhere near ready." "It's not Carnegie Hall. It's a library auditorium in East Haven, but Lucian will be there as the closing act." Sam shook her head vigorously. "That makes it even worse." "That makes it perfect." Samantha rolled back from the piano. "I'm not doing this to prove something to him." "I understand," Ariel said. "You're doing it to remind yourself who you really are." Silence filled the space. Then Ariel added, "When he humiliated you, you remained silent. Now it's your moment to speak." The week before, the showcase felt like climbing a mountain during a hurricane. Sam's arms ached constantly. Her back went into spasms. Old rehabilitation injuries whispered doubts through her nervous system. Despite this, she returned to that basement every single night. She wasn't chasing technical perfection. She was pursuing emotional truth. Her fingers occasionally missed their marks, but her music never failed to hit its target. She wasn't performing Debussy arrangements. She was channeling memories, loss, fury, and love, all set to a rhythm that belonged exclusively to her. 2 days before her performance, Sam received an invitation to a private dinner from one of the event's sponsors, a family friend connected to her mother's hospital work. Lucian Drexler was among the guests. He didn't recognize her initially. She had styled her hair differently, curled it elegantly, and carried herself with newfound poise. But when someone mentioned the community showcase and that wheelchair girl, he smirked and commented, "Oh, she'll be back in physical therapy before the second bar." The table erupted in laughter. Sam didn't join in. She locked eyes with him, calm and controlled, then turned to her dinner plate and said softly, "I'll ensure they reserve you a front row seat." Lucian blinked in confusion. "Excuse me," but Sam was already reaching for her water glass. "You'll want to be seated for what I'm about to perform." Ariel, sitting 3 seats away, fought back a grin so sharp it could have cut through steel. That evening, back in the basement, Samantha didn't practice technical exercises. She simply played. No interruptions, no breaks, just one continuous outpouring of everything that had been building inside her since that night on the Greenwood stage. Ariel stood silently at the back of the room, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time since she was 17, she whispered aloud to the empty air, "She's going to destroy him." At 11:43 p.m., Samantha closed the piano lid and turned toward Ariel. "Let's do this," she declared. Ariel raised an eyebrow. "Do what exactly?" Sam smiled, not broadly, but with complete conviction. "Let's remind him what music was originally meant to feel like." The East Haven Public Library bore no resemblance to a combat zone. Its humble brick facade, neat flower gardens, and cheerful small-town banners gave no indication of the storm about to unleash inside. But in the community auditorium tucked behind the children's reading section, a battle was waiting, fought with piano keys, courage, and unshakable determination. Samantha Linwood arrived at the backstage area 2 hours early. Her mother had curled her hair that morning, and her father had insisted on polishing her wheelchair until it gleamed like an award. She wore a navy blue dress with long sleeves and soft velvet gloves covering her hands, not for fashion, but to hide the nervous tremor in her fingers. "How are you feeling?" Ariel asked, walking alongside her. Samantha nodded once. "Terrified." Ariel smirked. "Perfect. Fear keeps arrogance in check." Inside the main hall, rows of chairs filled with neighbors, volunteers, students, and a handful of cultural elites who had come specifically to see the evening's headliner, Lucian Drexler. He hadn't arrived yet, but his presence hung in the air like overpowering cologne applied too early. Backstage, Sam went through her preparation ritual: finger stretches, breathing exercises, mental visualization. "Do you think he'll make another scene?" she asked suddenly. Ariel didn't respond immediately. "If he does, it won't matter. You'll have already said everything for him." 10 minutes before her slot, the evening's host, a cheerful woman in her 50s named Maureen, peeked backstage. "Sweetheart, you're on after this next performer. Do you need anything?" Sam shook her head. "Just room to breathe." Lucian arrived at 6:43 p.m. He entered through the side entrance, silk scarf draped around his neck, a smirk already warming his features. As he passed the posted performance lineup, he paused, then turned to the organizer beside him. "She's actually performing?" "Yes," the man replied nervously. Lucian chuckled under his breath. "Well, this should be inspirational." Samantha took the stage at 6:55 p.m. The spotlight embraced her gently. She rolled herself forward without assistance, locked her wheelchair brakes, and sat in perfect stillness. No smile, no greeting, just breathing. There were no papers before her, no written score, only a silent piano and a room holding its collective breath. She closed her eyes and began to play. The opening note was so low, so quiet it felt like a question whispered in a room full of strangers. The second carried memory. The third expressed defiance. Samantha didn't perform for elegance. She didn't chase perfect tempo or symmetry. She bled through the music. Each chord was a deliberately opened wound. Each pause represented breath stolen from years of being overlooked, pitied, and humiliated. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some leaned forward intently. Others blinked back unexpected tears before understanding why. Halfway through, Lucian crossed his arms defensively, but he didn't leave, because something within him, though he'd never acknowledge it, had stopped breathing. At the final crescendo, Samantha didn't bow gracefully. She didn't even look up. She simply lifted her hands from the keys, rolled back 2 feet, and allowed the silence to communicate what words could not. The room erupted. Not in polite applause, not in sympathetic clapping, in something far deeper. People rose to their feet. Not everyone, but enough. Some covered their mouths in awe, others bowed their heads respectfully. One woman whispered audibly, "She played like she's been waiting her entire life for this moment." Lucian stood frozen. For the first time in years, he had no critique, no smirk, no clever comment to diminish the moment. He looked down, then away, completely. When Samantha passed him backstage on her way out, she didn't pause. But she did speak. Just one sentence. "Now you understand what music sounds like when it emerges from pain you helped create." Outside under the fading Connecticut sunset, Ariel waited by the curb with a paper coffee cup and a grin that looked almost dangerous. Sam rolled toward her slowly, quietly, until Ariel asked, "So, did we emerge victorious?" Samantha gazed toward the street, toward the children still filing out in wonder, toward the auditorium they had just cracked open like an eggshell. "We didn't need victory." She paused thoughtfully. "We transformed the entire atmosphere." The showcase concluded, but its impact refused to fade. By morning, a shaky smartphone video of Samantha's performance had already found its way onto social media platforms. The camera wavered. The audio quality was poor, but none of that mattered because the emotional impact cut straight through. The hashtags gained momentum quickly. She played anyway. Wheelchair, but no limits. Silence is powerful. Buried among the praise was one clip that changed everything. A crystal-clear, uninterrupted recording from a local videographer in the 4th row. It captured everything from Samantha's entrance to the final note to her quiet, cutting words directed at Lucian Drexler. "Now you understand what music sounds like when it emerges from pain you helped create." The video went viral within 6 hours. By noon, talk shows were calling. Journalists from NPR, The Atlantic, and even Rolling Stone were reaching out. Half wanted to crown her the next voice of adaptive arts. The other half wanted to create clickbait headlines pitting her against Lucian. Samantha ignored every single one. She was back at the basement piano that night. Same gloves, same stool, same woman leaning in the corner with crossed arms. "You realize they're labeling you a symbol now," Ariel mentioned. "I have no interest in becoming a monument," Samantha muttered, striking a note that sounded more like a sigh. Ariel smirked. "That's exactly why you're the one who truly matters." 3 days passed in a blur. Emails flooded in continuously. Some came from strangers raising disabled children. Others from veterans who had lost limbs. Some from women who had once been dismissed and told to remain in the background. All conveyed the same message in different words. "You made me feel acknowledged." But not everyone was celebrating. Lucian Drexler, once untouchable, now found himself under intense scrutiny. Sponsors began reconsidering partnerships. 3 conservatories released statements distancing themselves from his comments. A leaked internal memo from a major foundation revealed a pending investigation into patterns of exclusionary practices and verbal misconduct. He wasn't canceled outright, but he was definitely cornered. Initially, he ignored the backlash. Then he did what men like him typically do when they start bleeding. He fought back. On the 4th day, an opinion piece appeared in the New York Chronicle, authored by Drexler himself. "Performance theater does not equal musical talent. Why emotion should stay separate from classical music." He didn't mention Samantha by name. He didn't need to. He called her the embodiment of political performance art. He described Ariel as an agitator disguised as inspiration. He concluded the piece with a line that dripped venom. "Music is sacred ground. Not every wounded spirit deserves to preach from its podium." Ariel slammed the newspaper down on the piano. "He thinks this is still his domain." Samantha didn't flinch. She had read the article twice, printed it, highlighted it, studied every insult like a roadmap through his decaying ego. "Then perhaps it's time we demonstrate who's really holding the keys now," she said. That night, Samantha received an invitation, not from a media outlet, not from a festival, from a woman named Margot Eldridge, director of the National Assembly of the Arts. A private concert, one performance, exclusive audience of patrons, curators, and national-level decision-makers. One request: play what only you can play. The rest will handle itself. The night before the concert, Samantha wheeled herself into the basement one final time. The lights were dimmed. The air carried scents of dust and possibility. Ariel stood by the wall holding a small wooden box. "What's that?" Samantha asked. "Something I never thought I'd give away." She opened the container. Inside rested a simple metronome, old wooden, cracked near the base. Ariel wound it once. The slow tick-tock filled the silence. "My grandfather gave this to me the day I first performed professionally. He said it wasn't there to keep time. It was to remind me that my time had arrived." Samantha reached out, touched the worn brass top, then looked up. "It's our moment now." Outside, the sky crackled with spring thunder. Inside, the storm was prepared to unleash. The invitation-only recital took place at the Ellington Hall, an intimate wood-paneled venue in Washington, D.C., known more for diplomatic gatherings than dramatic performances. It had hosted presidents, philanthropists, and composers whose names resonated across continents. But that night, it belonged to a girl in a wheelchair who had been told she didn't belong anywhere near a stage. Samantha Linwood arrived at 6:40 p.m. She wore a deep emerald dress that complemented the soft green velvet curtains. Her hair was pinned elegantly behind one ear. No makeup, no jewelry, just crystal clarity. Her fingers, wrapped in thin black gloves, rested calmly in her lap. The Steinway Grand awaited her at center stage, illuminated from above like a confessional. Around her sat 40 of the most influential figures in American arts: curators, program directors, private patrons. And somewhere in the second row, slightly to the left, sat Lucian Drexler. He had come not to support, not to surrender, but to observe and measure how much damage he could still inflict. Ariel stood just off stage. She wore no credentials. She didn't smile. She simply nodded when Sam turned her head. "You're not alone." Margot Eldridge approached the podium. "Our final performer tonight is not here to prove anything. She's here because the world deserves to listen. Please welcome Samantha Linwood." Sam rolled herself forward. She didn't bow, didn't speak. She positioned her hands on the piano, closed her eyes, and drew a deep breath. Then she played. Not a song, but a tempest. Not a composition, but a confrontation. Her fingers moved not as instruments of melody, but as weapons of truth. She wove together sounds that had never been written, pain that had never been voiced. Dissonance cracked like bones being reset. Silence broke between chords like open wounds learning to breathe again. She merged Ariel's fire with her own anguish. She played memories of rehabilitation centers, of watching recitals from the back row, of doors that were quietly locked behind her. She played the exact opposite of what Lucian Drexler called music, and it was absolutely magnificent. Midway through, one of the patrons dropped her wine glass. It shattered against the floor, but nobody turned. Nobody moved. By the final note, Samantha's chest was rising and falling as if she had just sprinted miles on legs she no longer possessed. Her arms trembled, but she didn't collapse. She leaned back and let the room absorb what they had witnessed. Silence held for 8 full seconds. Then one clap, then 2, then everyone joined in. People rose to their feet. Ariel gripped the curtain with both hands, A man in the back cleaned his glasses without pretending he wasn't crying. Lucian Drexler didn't applaud, but he didn't leave, either. He remained motionless, pale, frozen in a seat he could no longer pretend belonged to him. Afterward, backstage, Margot approached Samantha with tear-streaked cheeks. "We're launching a new national program," she said. "It needs a name. I was hoping you'd allow us to use yours." Samantha smiled faintly. "If it helps others like me get here faster, call it whatever you want." But it wasn't Margot who left the deepest impression that night. It was Lucian. He approached quietly, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes stripped of their usual polish. He didn't speak immediately. Then, with a voice smaller than anyone had ever heard him use, he said, "I didn't realize music could hurt that beautifully." Samantha met his gaze directly. "It always could. You just refused to listen." That night, Ariel and Samantha sat in a diner off Route 395. 2 black coffees, shared silence. Ariel finally asked, "Was that sufficient?" Samantha stirred her cup, then gazed out the window. "I didn't play to be sufficient. I played so the next girl won't have to fight for her place." And somewhere in a corner of the country, a little girl, in a hospital bed, watched that performance on a cracked iPad. She whispered to her nurse, "I want to play like her someday." Spring returned gradually to Connecticut. The blossoms near Greenwood Center for the Arts bloomed late that year, as if the trees themselves were reluctant to enter a world that had recently shifted. Inside the conservatory, the same polished floors remained. The same oil portraits of famous musicians still hung prominently along the main corridor. But something else had changed, subtle, yet permanent. People now walked more, slowly past the recital hall. Some paused at the piano, touched its edges, and remembered what had occurred not long ago. There was no memorial plaque, no newspaper clipping, no framed certificate. But the memory of Samantha Linwood's story lived there like a sustained musical. Note, soft, undeniable, lingering. Samantha never returned to Greenwood, not to study, not to perform. She had nothing left to prove. Instead, she went back to where it all began. That basement in South Hartford, with its dusty upright piano and old wooden metronome still ticking with quiet faith. She and Ariel transformed it into something greater. A classroom, a sanctuary. They named it Unspoken. No tuition fees, no auditions, no dress requirements. Only one rule. If the world never gave you a stage, we'll build one here. In the months that followed, students arrived from everywhere. A boy with a speech disorder who used rhythm to replace words. A teenage girl with a prosthetic arm who learned to drum using her feet. A retired janitor who had always wanted to learn blues piano. And one afternoon, a nervous-looking mother wheeled in her daughter, 8 years old, wheelchair-bound, clutching a plastic recorder like it was precious treasure. She stared at Samantha with wide eyes and whispered, "You're the one from the video." Samantha smiled, wheeled over, and said, "No, sweetheart, you're the one who's next." As months passed, Ariel was invited back to speak at universities she had once felt exiled from. She didn't go to boast. She went to tell stories about dignity, about silence, about how justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived in a minor key and whispered through broken fingers. And Lucian Drexler. He disappeared from the main stage circuit. He declined interviews, turned down festival invitations. Rumors circulated that he had moved somewhere in upstate New York, working on something different. But one day, a letter arrived at Unspoken. No return address, no signature, just a note written in elegant cursive. "I thought I was building temples with my music, but you taught me that temples mean nothing if they have no doors. Thank you for opening mine." Tucked inside was a folded copy of a new composition. Title, "For the Ones We Almost Didn't Hear." Composer, Lucian Drexler. The world didn't suddenly become fairer after Samantha's final performance. Doors didn't swing open for every disabled artist. Critics still asked thoughtless questions, institutions still hesitated, but something fundamental had shifted. Somewhere in quiet corners of rehearsal rooms and small-town community halls, the atmosphere had changed. The whisper had begun, and now it had a melody. Late one evening, long after students had gone home, Samantha sat alone in the classroom. The lights were dimmed. Her hands rested gently on the keys. She didn't play. She listened to the room, to the stillness, to the quiet that used to mean emptiness, but now meant possibility. Ariel stepped in, leaned against the doorframe with crossed arms. Samantha turned slightly and asked, "Do you think he ever truly learned anything?" Ariel smirked. "I don't care." She walked in and sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, because the lesson was never for him. It was for everyone who thought they didn't deserve to be heard. Samantha nodded slowly, and with that, she pressed a single note, soft, steady, unafraid. The kind of note that doesn't end. It just waits for someone else to join in.